This time we're going to talk about the topic of nature versus nurture and human diversity. Human diversity means individual differences. People differ in many aspects, and the difference can be considerable. If you look at the body height, body weight, body shape, people differ. This picture shows some tall people and some not so tall people. The top picture is the tall guy is Yao Ming, basketball player. The shorter person, relatively shorter person, is I think it's Jet Li, the movie star. And this picture in the bottom, this shows two athletes, professional athletes. The tall guy is a basketball player. The shorter person is a jockey for horse racing. This gentleman ride horses as a profession. You see, human height can differ considerably, and why? Psychology and biology try to understand why. What are the factors producing human diversity or individual differences? One kind of a reason or one class of reason is nature. That is, nature is something individuals cannot change. You don't have control over nature. It's something inborn. It's something innate. Genetic inheritance might be one of the innate factors. But nurture or environmental factors also play big roles. Nurture means environment, your life experiences. What kind of experiences you go through over the lifetime. And some evidence come from population research. If you look at people's height over different generations, this chart shows soldiers. Soldiers are mostly male, men, and over the decades, starting from the 1960s to the 1990s, the average height of these European countries have increased in men. And supposedly, these populations have a stable genetic makeup. The genes do not change that much. The gene pool, the genome in the populations do not change that much over 30 years, but height really is increasing. What might be the factors? Maybe nutrition, maybe exercising, some environmental factors must be responsible or partially responsible for this change in the population's average height. In psychology, in psychological research, we pay a lot of attention to variables. A variable is a characteristic that can take on different values. There are, in physical characteristics, height, weight, these are variables. These variables vary considerably in the human population. And then in the social area, people's academic achievement varies, personality traits also vary. And we're interested in many different variables. Besides achievement, life outcomes, we are also interested in personality. When we were talking about personality psychology, we introduced the Big Five model. The five-factor model captures most variabilities or individual differences in personality. And there are 5 major categories or major factors. Emotional stability, that is one dimension that people differs. Some people are more stable in emotions and more relatively less likely to be influenced by situation changes. But some individuals are more labile, are more responsive or more sensitive to environmental changes in terms of mood regulations. Extroversion, introversion differ from person to person. Some people are more extroverted, some people are more introverted. Conscientiousness, this include characteristics such as being responsible, being hardworking, being dependable, being careful, being thorough, paying attention to details. People differ in all these areas. Agreeableness, these are interpersonal characteristics. Some people are more agreeable, more pleasant, more likable, more kind-hearted, more warm, more warmth shows more empathy and closeness. That's agreeableness. People differ in this area so much. And openness to experiences. Some people are more traditional, less open-minded, more conservative, but some other people are more adventurous, more open to all kinds of experiences. These are all individual differences. They differ from person to person. What are some of the factors that cause the differences in personality, in behavior, in emotions, even in physical characteristics? Biology and psychology pay attention to two sets of factors. Nature mostly refers to inheritance and biological constitutions. Nurture mostly relates to experiences and socialization. There has always been controversies or debate about nature versus virtue's influence on people's outcomes and behavior. Got a couple of quotes. The first one is from Shakespeare. In the play of Tempest, Shakespeare have this really nice quote: "A devil, a born devil, on whose nurture can never stick, on whom my pains humanly taken, all lost, quite lost." This quote seems to emphasize nature's power. There's something that seems to be innate in a person's characteristic. Environmental, socialization, education, nurture seems to have a limited power in changing. This is one extreme of the debate over nature versus nurture. Some other people, some other philosophers, scholars have a different view. The ancient Chinese scholar Confucius seemed to believe in nature's power. He says an infant's nature is born to be good. In other words, when babies were born, they all have the same nature. But education makes them into different people. People do not come in different types. It's education, it's socialization, it's environmental influence that create different outcomes. The father who does not teach his sons his duties is equally guilty with the son who neglects them. Part of the nurture or important part of the environmental influence is coming from the family and coming from the parents. Parental education, parental guidance is a big part of the environmental influence. There, in naturalistic observations, in everyday observations, we do notice that nature makes a difference. Nature has some profound influence on people's characteristics. Many biological characteristics are inherited. Hair color, eye color, people's height, and risk factors to some illnesses are inheritable, highly heritable. High blood pressure seems to run in family, at least the risk factors for high blood pressure. Schizophrenia has a high risk factor in terms of inheritance. And personality traits seems to also have a big component of inheritance. Also, if we look at everyday life, there are some evidences for people taking advantage of inheritance. for example, in selective breeding, racehorses are selectively breeded. Fast horses, fast male horses would mate with fast female horses to produce the fast offsprings. Pets like doggies, highly sociable. They were in the human history, they were domesticated by our ancestors by selective breeding. You selectively breed those doggies were really sociable to humans, really obedient. In psychological research and biological research, researchers selectively breed some rats. Some rats are selectively breeded for their fearfulness or anxiety. Some were selectively breeded for their aggressiveness. These were important for psychological research and biological research. Modern biology has made great contributions to our understanding of nature and inheritance. One major discovery was the genes, people's genetic makeup. We know that here within the nucleus of each cell, we carry a complete copy of a genetic makeup or genetic information. We carry all our chromosomes in the nucleus of each cell. And altogether, each person has a 46 chromosomes. This is for assuming that the person has a normal chromosomes. And in normal people, half of the 46 chromosomes would come from the father. The other half would come from the mother. Altogether, we have 23 pairs or sets and 46 singletons. A gene is a segment of DNA molecules. So a gene would consist of many DNA molecules. And DNAs are linked together to form a chromosome. DNAs and chromosomes specify how to build proteins. Proteins is a basic structural material for the human body and for all animals' bodies. A gene is a self-replicating unit. It tries to replicate itself. Genes are replicators, and they replicate by reproduction. So they can pass down from one generation to the next. Here are some definitions of key terminology: chromosomes, DNA, genome. You can look at them closely. Here are some pictures of the human chromosomes. We have 23 pairs. The last pair, the 23rd pair of chromosomes, determine biological sex. When a person has X and Y on the last pair of chromosomes, this person would be biologically female. On the other hand, if a person has two Ys on the last pair of chromosomes, this person would be a male in biological sex. Only males, only men have the Y chromosome, so only the father can pass on a Y chromosome to the next generation, to the son. Mothers always have two X. Mothers always have two X chromosomes, and cannot pass on a Y chromosome. This means that a father would make a greater contribution. Play a bigger role in determining the biological sex of the offspring. Father could randomly contribute an X or Y, but mothers always contribute an X. When genes are being replicated from one generation to the next generation, there might be some errors in the transmission or in the copy. Some of those errors may produce disorders or may cause developmental problems for the next generation. One example would be problems with the last pair of chromosomes, the 23rd pair. And in some rare cases, a fetus would carry an extra piece in the 23rd set. The normal 23rd set would be either two X's or two Y's. But here, in this picture, you have an extra X, and that's could cause a serious developmental problems in sex development, in development of sex organs. And this could have an impact on reproduction. This person may have a problem or difficulties reproducing. Another genetic issue that gets a lot of attention is problems with the 21st chromosome, the 21st set, or the 21st pair. In normal fetuses, in normal reproduction, the fetus or the person would carry two chromosomes on the 21st pair. In rare cases, there's an addition. There's a third piece. There's additional extra piece to the 21st pair. This person would have what we call the Down's syndrome. The Down's syndrome has some symptoms, intellectual disabilities or cognitive disabilities, and there are some organ problems. Some of these organ problems would lead to respiratory infections, risk factors, and also people with Down syndrome have some characteristic facial appearances. This information shows that the genes or genetic makeup does play an important role in the determination of physical characteristics. And we know that genes matter a lot. Nature is important, but what about nurture? Nurture is also important. There are different environmental factors that really influential on people's outcomes and people's characteristics. One influence, social influence, is parental, parents, family, the nucleus family and extended family. And then as people grow older, as kids grow older, their social circles expand. When you were babies, the most important influence comes from the parents, from the caregivers, from the fathers, especially from the mom in most societies. But as you grow older, when you go to kindergarten, peers start to enter your life, and people outside of the family start to play a role in influencing your development. By the time you go to school, your peers become even more important. After adolescence, when people become young adults, peer influences become even more important than their original family. A wider circle of influence would come from cultures. Different cultures have different customs, basic beliefs, different lifestyle preferences, even food preferences and dress codes would differ from culture to culture. All these circles of society influence each person's development and characteristics. Nurture is a big part of the game. Some psychological theories focus on influence of nurture. One example would be the social learning theory. This theory was developed by Albert Bandura. Bandura showed that kids and also adults learn by imitation. And we imitate our models. We observe, people are very observant. People observe the outcomes of other people's behavior. If you observe some people doing something that's getting punished, you probably don't want to do that. And in the pandemic, you observe other people, a lot of people are wearing face masks, and that's very informative. If many people around you are wearing face masks, probably you want to wear face masks yourself. That's imitation, social learning. Other people's behavior provide a lot of information about the situation. Suppose you pass, you're walking down on the street and somebody is laying on the street, laying by the sidewalk. And if nobody pays attention, if all the passers-by are just passing by, ignoring the person, probably you would ignore the person yourself. You are observing other people's behavior and imitating other people's behavior. Social learning is a big part of the environmental influence. Another theory relevant to environmental influence is a schema theory. We talked about the schema theory in developmental psychology. Piaget loved to use this concept. As children develop, they can, and they learn, they master a lot of schemas. Some of these schemas are about typical actions you would take in certain situations. You all have the schema of going to school. Sometimes action schemas are called scripts. Scripts are prescriptions about how to act in typical environment. Going to school, this script has a lot of informative elements. You know that every time you go, you are going to a particular school, you know what to expect. You know that you're going to take classes. You're going to read books. You are going to need textbooks. And you will take exams. You will be evaluated. You will have a score assigned to your performance. These are the elements of a schema of going to school. And we learn this schema and we use this schema. We learn these schemas from the environment. Different cultures may have a different schemas. For example, eating dinner. Eating dinner is a common schema to all cultures, but different cultures may have different elements in this schema. In Canada, eating dinner may mean that you eat like a sandwich or a steak, fancy dinner, potato, boiled potato or baked potato, maybe some French fries, salad, soup, and you need fork and knife. That's how you eat your dinner in Canada. But in some Asian cultures, Japanese, Chinese, Korean, dinner means rice. You eat rice. You need a nice bowl of white rice. That's main content of dinner. And you need veggies, vegetables. Well, maybe you need something to go with the white rice. And most important, you need a pair of chopsticks. You need chopsticks to eat your dinner. Maybe you don't need a fork and knife that much. These are the different cultural schemas about food preferences and eating behavior. And these all influence people's outcomes. Culture and family also have a lot of influence in people's basic beliefs. Usually, religious beliefs and spiritual practices tend to get a lot of influence in family. Family tradition play a big role. Nurture really matters. One area in psychology and biology has a lot of influence on our understanding of nature versus nurture. That is evolutionary theory, developed by Charles Darwin. The evolutionary theory is a guiding framework for most research in biology and psychology. There are some basic tenets of the evolutionary theory. One is that the behavior patterns are evolved strategies for ensuring survival and reproduction. Survival and reproduction means the passing of genes to the next generation. And these strategies are designed for a particular type of environment. Some of these environments date back to millions of years to our ancestral past. Another basic idea in evolutionary psychology is that a type of behavior, for example, parenting behavior, mate preference, food preferences, is present in the population today because it has enabled people to cope with the survival and reproduction challenges in a particular environment in the evolutionary theory. We all have, nowadays in today's population, many people have fear, at least a dislike of spiders and snakes. According to the evolutionary theory, this might date back to our ancestral past. The fear of spiders or snakes are adaptations or evolved strategies. They were designed to deal with a kind of environment that was prevalent in our ancestral past, millions of years ago, or even 10,000 years ago. In those kind of early human history, the environment had a lot of danger. A lot of danger were posed by dangerous animals like poisonous snakes and poisonous spiders. And those ancestors of ours had the fear of snakes and spiders. They were more likely to survive and reproduce. So they passed down these fear genes, fear of spiders and snakes genes, to the next generation. We carry those genes. Therefore, even today, many people have a biological preparedness to be afraid of spiders and snakes. Although nowadays, this kind of fear is not that useful. If you live in the urban area, it's really unlikely for anybody to be harmed by snakes or spiders. There are some critical issues that the evolutionary psychology and evolutionary biology needs to solve. Number one, how did the behavior strategy appear in the first place? A behavior must have a beginning or must have a genesis for it to be preserved and passed on to the next generation. How would a new behavior appear? Another issue that once a useful behavior appears, how does it get preserved and get spread and get passed in the population to the next generation? These are the fundamental issues. There's one misunderstanding that natural selection gives rise to new behaviors. And so nature does not produce new behaviors. Nature does not intentionally design useful behaviors. No, that is not the way new behaviors are produced. New behaviors arise from random mutation. It's random. It's random mutation of the genes. It's pure luck, pure chance, according to the traditional evolutionary theory, at least. Only after a good behavior or useful behavior or an adaptive trait has appeared via random mutation, then it can get spread in the population. It gets spread and preserved in the population by way of natural selection. There are two major channels to natural selection. One is called selection of the fittest for survival. Another one is called sexual selection. This is mate preferences in the population for reproduction. Let's look at how random mutation would produce new traits. Random mutation occur all the time. The virus we are facing, the COVID-19 pandemic, the virus is going through mutation all the time. We had the Delta strain some time ago. Now we have a new strain, Omicron. Omicron is a new strain of virus that has some mutation from the previous generations. And in more complex organisms, genetic mutation also occurs. This is a picture of a fruit fly. This guy has a mutation. Most of the mutations are not good. They produce problems. Some of these problems are fatal, kills the organism. Some of these flies have mutations to the eye, producing different eyes, different wings. Most of these are not good, not useful. But some mutations happens to be adaptive to the environment. Some mutations, just by pure luck, have some advantage to a particular environment. For example, at the very beginning, in a particular environment, the bugs are mostly green in color. Genetic mutation produce some discolored bugs, like these guys are brown. If by random chance, by luck, the environment changes, the climate changes, the trees die, and the leaves turn brown. Now, the green bugs might be in trouble, but the brown bugs have an advantage. This advantage camouflage, the color surface, the camouflage hide them from the predators. And this is really just a chance, random chance. And this chance produced a mutation. The trait of color brown really just happened to be adaptive in this particular environment. And now it gets passed, gets preserved to the next generation. The brown bugs are more likely to survive and reproduce. They pass on their brown genes to the next generation. After a few generations, most of the organisms would have this trait. This is natural selection. Natural selection of the fittest for survival. The color of the bug really fits the particular environment. An interesting line of evolutionary psychology studies reproduction, mate preferences, and reproductive strategies. There seems to be gender differences between men and women in mate preferences and in mating strategies. One difference is that women are less interested in uncommitted casual sex than men. Men are more interested in casual sexual relations. Why? Female reproductive strategy seems to be selectively made with few males or even one single male. And this male must have desirable traits. Females seems to be more selective, more selective in choosing mates than males. According to evolutionary psychology, men and women have a different reproductive strategy. And these strategies are based on their investments, so-called reproductive investments. Women's reproductive investments are heavy, relatively speaking. Being pregnant, pregnancy in the evolutionary past, in our ancestral histories, pregnancy could be dangerous. And also, when women are pregnant, they are less able to work, to get food, and take care of themselves. And also, after giving birth to the baby, the mother needs to take care of the baby. Nursing, protection, taking care of the baby, that will prevent them from fully engaged in work. Women's reproductive investments is heavy, and they need help. They need protection, and they need resources. And they need committed partner to provide those kind of resources and protection. According to the evolutionary theory, in our ancestral past, those female human beings who selectively chose one or a limited, really small number of desirable partners, they were more likely to reproduce, not only reproduce, but also bring up their kids, make sure that their kids, their offspring survive and able to reproduce. They pass on the genes, this kind of genes, selective genes, innate preferences to the next generation. On the other hand, the males, their reproductive investment is not so heavy, relatively speaking. So their best strategy for passing on their genes is to mate with multiple partners. They would like to, that's why man seems to be more interested in having a variety of mates. Mate preferences also show some gender differences. Females, well, the traits in females preferred by males seem to be related with fertility, reproductive fitness. Men usually prefer women who are young, within the reproduction age, and physically attractive. Physically attractive means that they have a particular body shape, body type, hourglass kind of body shape. And these characteristics are related with fertility, related with reproduction. Being young, that shows up in smooth skins, young features, etc. On the other hand, women prefer certain traits, different traits in men as their partners. One class of trait preferred in males is social status, dominance, and control of resources, high social status. This could be measured in wealth, in money, or in position in the society, education. These are some indicators of social status, profession. And also women prefer loyal partners, partners loyal to them. And this means that the partner will be willing to invest the resources in the family, in the woman, and in the children they reproduce together. These are the mate preferences between men and women, and they can be understood to a certain degree based on the evolutionary theory. An interesting line of research related with nature and nurture is behavior genetics. Behavior genetics study what proportion of behavior differences can be explained by genetic inheritance versus environmental influence. Suppose we can quantify all the individual differences in the population. Individual differences in body weight, body height, personality. What proportion of these differences among the population can be attributed to a genetic inheritance? And what proportion can be attributed to environmental influence? It's a quantitative research. Behavior genetics try to quantify the influence of genetics versus environmental influence. There are different strategies to answer these questions. One common or widely spread strategy is to study twins, identical twins, and fraternal twins. Identical twins, they share almost 100% of their genes. They share the majority of their genes. They're highly similar. Although they don't share 100% of genes, there are some subtle differences, small differences, even between identical twins. On the other hand, fraternal twins, they share about 50% of the genes. They are just like regular brothers and sisters, regular siblings. Identical twins share more genes than fraternal twins. That's for sure. That is a certainty. And we can compare identical twins with fraternal twins. If identical twins are more similar than fraternal twins, it means genes make a contribution. Genes contribute, make a significant contribution to individual differences. And we can compare identical twins versus fraternal twins on personality, introversion, extroversion, emotional stability, etc. We can compare them on life outcomes, diverse relations, career accomplishment, and interests. And we can compare them on everyday preferences and interests, hobbies, food preferences, sports preferences. There are more nuanced strategies for genetic behavior genetics. We can compare identical twins separated at birth. This would allow us to isolate the impact of environmental influences versus genetic influences to a certain degree, although it's not really clear-cut. Identical twins, some of them were adopted at birth and adopted to different families. They grew up in different households. They share almost, not really 100%, almost close to 100% genes, but they had a different environment. And suppose in this case, they are still highly similar. Even when raised in different households, they are really still similar just by having common genes. That will show the power of genetic inheritance. And we can also do adoption studies. Adoption studies, so if a child gets adopted by a foster family, they have a foster siblings, they would, the foster family would provide the environment. They would provide the environment, but the genes would be coming from the biological parents. Would the adoptees be more similar to adopted parents or their genetic biological parents? This kind of research also shed light on the relative contribution of genes versus environment. Some interesting findings from the twin studies. Identical twins are more similar indeed than fraternal twins. And identical twins separated at birth are still very similar. Even though they grew up in different households, they are quite similar to each other. And there's a lot of research showing that adopted kids are more similar to their biological parents than their adopted parents. This again shows the power of genetic inheritance. Some identical twins were adopted into different families upon birth, and researchers find them after 40 years, when they're 40 years old, and study them, measure them. Even after growing up in different households, these identical twins are still highly similar. They're similar in personality, similar in intelligence test scores, in political attitudes, and they're even similar in tastes and interests. They are very similar in specific fears. They have a common kind of phobias and fears, claustrophobia. If one twin has it, the other twin is more likely to have it. They have a different, very similar brain waves. Brain waves are very similar. Of course, brain waves could be determined by biological factors, genetic factors, and also heart rate, risk factors to heart diseases, high blood pressure, highly similar. On the other hand, adopted children are more similar to their biological relatives, biological genetic relatives, biological parents. However, home environment also matters. The home, the family, parenting still matters a lot, especially when the parenting differences are extreme. One really limiting factor of the adoption studies and the identical twin studies were that suppose two twins got adopted upon birth, two identical twins, the family differences, the environmental differences between these two people are not that great. Supposedly, two twins are adopted to families in the same country, both in Canada, and the adoptive or foster families are most likely to be in similar situation, maybe middle class, upper middle class. Therefore, the environmental differences, the parenting differences between the two adopted twins will not be so great, will not be so extreme. Research shows that when the environmental differences are more extreme, like poverty, if one twin is adopted to a family in a rich country, the other twin, identical twin, is adopted by a family in a poor country, then there might be a less similarity between the two identical twins. Siblings are less similar than twins, than identical twins. Fraternal twins are less similar than identical twins. Part of the reason may be genes, maybe their genetic inheritance. But another part of the reason of the difference between fraternal twins and regular siblings may be the environment. The environment are less similar for fraternal twins and siblings than identical twins. They don't look identical. They look different and they act different. That may make people around them treat them differently. And for regular siblings, the siblings do not have the same family environment. When the firstborn is born, the firstborn is only kid in the family, only baby in the house. But when the second child is born, the environment changes. There's one additional person in the house. Environment variability between regular brothers and sisters are bigger than identical twins. That might be responsible for some of the differences. Another law showing the importance of nature or innate or inborn characteristics is temperament research. Temperament, people have a different temperament. Temperament is really related with emotional stability. These are so basically these are emotional reactions. Some people have intense emotional reactions and they are easily influenced by the environment. If there's something really a little bit threatening, these people react with a lot of anxiety and fear. And if there's just a small setback in their achievements, in their relations, they would react with intense sadness and intense negative mood. They are sensitive, they are reactive. Some people are more reactive, but some people are cool and calm and more mellow. They are less perturbed, they are less disturbed by the environmental changes. These are stable individual differences. And these individual differences appear early in infancy. Just a few days after being born, babies would show temperament differences. Some babies are difficult. They cry a lot and they are very difficult to soothe. They show a lot of fear reactions, distress when there's a stranger in the room. When a stranger walks to their little crib towards them, their heartbeat would change and would increase. They are the reactive babies. But some babies are easy babies. They don't cry that much, very easy to take care of. And when strangers approach them, they don't show distress. They are very calm, they are very cool, very mellow. And these individual differences tend to persist. Researchers measured babies at 4 months old and measured them again when they grow up to be 4 years old, and then measure them again when they are teenagers, 15 years old. And they found that these temperament differences tend to persist. A baby who is highly reactive, highly fearful, highly difficult when measured by 4 months will still be very shy, very introverted, very nervous when he is 4 years old. And he would still be very likely, highly likely to be introverted when he or she is a teenager. This kind of characteristic stay for a long time. And that shows a lot of genetic influence, a genetic and biological influence. Nervous system and heart rate are highly influenced by the genetics. Even when the environment changes, as a child grows up, the personality trait, temperament still really is stable. Epigenetics is a really interesting concept. Epigenetics is a study of environmental influence on genes expression that occur without DNA change. That means that if you have two people with the same genes, suppose two people both carry the genes that give them a risk factor for developing depression. If they grew up in different environments, there might be a possibility that one person actually develop depression, major depressive disorders, but the other person does not. Environmental influences would have a big impact on the expression of genetics. People with the same genes or genetic factors, genetic risk factors, may have different outcomes in different environments. Environmental factors are indeed very important. Environmental factors would influence gene expression right from the beginning. In the prenatal developmental period, before the baby was born, the fetus would be influenced by the environment. The main environment for fetus for prenatal development would be the placenta in the womb of the mom, and teratodins, drugs, toxins, harmful substances could pass from the mother to the fetus, and that would influence genetic expression. Nutrition, stress, hormones from the mothers also influence the developing fetus. The postnatal development in the infancy and early childhood period, parenting styles, attachment, care, quality of care, neglect, abuse, this would influence the expression of genes. Kids may have the same genes, but the different parenting styles would produce a difference. And in adolescence, social context, environmental complexity, stimulating environment, education opportunities, social opportunities, extracurricular activities would influence the eventual expression of the genes, and even in adulthood. Exercise, nutrition, lifestyles, wealth. Actually, wealth have a lot of impact on the expression of genes. Being in poverty is not good for genetic expression. There's interaction, constant interaction between genetic makeups and environmental influence. Life experiences influence brain development. Research shows that if you take baby rights and divide them into two groups. For one group, you give them a very poor, not rich, impoverished environment. No toys, no stimulation, no peers, just water and food, just enough nutrition, not a lot of stimulation. The other group, you give them a rich environment, enriched environment. You give them a lot of toys, you give them a lot of stuff to do, and you give them peer contact. After a period development, you compare their brain cells, their neurons, nerve cells. The rats who have had experience in enriched environments, their brain cells have more connections, have more branches, have more better developed brain cells. And that shows that enriched environment is very important for early development. If you think about the COVID is really harmful for kids. The kids don't have enough opportunities to explore, to get socialized, to get all kinds of stimulation. And their environment is not as enriched compared with before the pandemic. That might limit their cognitive development. Many pediatricians are worried about this impact, social impact and developmental impact created by the pandemic. It's bad for adults because of social isolation, and it's particularly harmful for children who need the stimulating environment to help grow their brain cells. And practice makes good. If you learn a particular skill and you need to practice it a lot, after a lot of practice, more brain areas might be activated by the task compared with before the practice. The moral of the research is that nature and nurture interact to work at the neuron level to shape the synapses, to shape the connections. You use it, you keep it. If you don't use it, you lose it. You lose the connection. This might be why that for people who have risk factors for developing like Alzheimer's disease, when they get older, using your brain, using the brain heavily and regularly and actively, staying cognitively active is a good way to prevent Alzheimer's disease and early onset dementia. Brain development does not end in childhood. Plasticity. Plasticity is a concept that tissues do change in organizing themselves in the brain in response to new experience. You can always learn some new skills and be good at it. And your brain is wired, is set up to do that. In terms of nurture, the parents have a lot of influence. This is particularly true in the early developmental history of a person. In infancy and early childhood, parents are the major source of influence of socialization. Psychoanalysis, especially attachment theory, places great importance on parental influence. And that sometimes they blame a lot of problems on bad mothering. When we were discussing developmental psychology, we talked about Mary Ainsworth. Mary Ainsworth believed that attachment styles is really influencing how the kids develop abilities to cope and to deal with uncertain situations. She developed the strange situation test or the strange room test. The strange room or the strange situation is basically a new environment for the child. And Mary Ainsworth believed that when a child gets into an unfamiliar situation, how she reacts largely depends on how the child reacts would largely depend on how the child has developed an attachment style with the mother. If the child has developed a secure attachment with the mother, the child will be able to remain cool and calm and controlled in the new environment. On the other hand, if the child has developed an insecure attachment to the mother, the child will be anxious, will be really fearful in the new environment. Also, Mary Ainsworth believed that the mother had the main responsibility for shaping the attachment style. If the mother is inattentive, is non-responsive, inconsistent in taking care of the baby will develop an insecure attachment to the mother. The mother gets a lot of blaming. This is not entirely true. The mother-child relation is interactive, it's two-way. It's two-way interaction. Suppose you have two babies. One is difficult and one is easy. One is more calm and non-reactive, but the other baby cries all the time. The difficult baby is going to frustrate the parent and get the parent tired, exhausted. And this being tired and exhausted would impact how effectively the parent takes care of the baby, the child. There's two-way interaction between child and parents. It's not one way. Also, the largest parenting effects occur as extremes. Extremely neglectful mothers or fathers, parents, would produce a big effect. And it's that's really kind of abusive mothers and fathers would produce big effect. Extreme parenting styles would produce the largest parenting effect. Within a certain range, the effect is not so striking. There's also a lot of research that shared environment influence less than 10% of personality differences. So in personality, the genetic inheritance does play a big role. Peer influence is particularly important in adolescence. And it's really difficult to trace, difficult to quantify. But we know that peer pressure is important and conformity is very important, especially in adolescence. Cultural influences. Culture refers to the pattern of ideas, attitudes, values, traditions shared by a group. And culture is passed on from one generation to the next. On this planet, there are different cultures. The cultural differences are often pretty large. Psychological research focus on individualism versus collectivism. These are the major cultural differences studied by psychologists. Psychologists paid a lot of attention to individualism versus collectivism. There's an assumption that most Western European and North American countries have individualistic cultures. All the other cultures are mostly collectivistic. Asian cultures, African cultures, South American cultures are mostly collectivistic. The difference between individualism and collectivism mostly relate with an individual's relation with other people. In individualistic cultures, the emphasis is on independence of individual. The independence of the individual is highly valued. A person takes responsibility for him or herself. A person takes care of him or herself. Independence is very important. And the individual promotes personal ideals, strengths, and goals. There's a clear boundary between the individual and other people. Sometimes it is in competition, the individual is in competition with other people. But collectivist cultures value interdependence. That means people are connected to others. Individuals emphasize the connection of him or herself with other people and with the group. The self is embedded in a complex web of relations. Relations are really important and group identities are important. This might be true from my experience. In the Chinese culture, the basic unit of the group is family. An individual's relation with the family is very important, highly valued. Some differences between individualism and collectivism. Self-concept in individualism is independent. For the collectivism is interdependent. Life task, what do you care about in life? In individualist cultures, your task is to discover and express your uniqueness. What's so special about you? How you differ from other people? How do you set yourself apart from others? How do you distinguish yourself? But in collectivism cultures, it's mostly maintained connections, fit in, performing roles. However, cultures are changing. Many collectivistic cultures are becoming more and more individualistic. That's my observation. And what matters in is really different. So individualistic cultures, I am the center. Personal achievements, fulfillments, my rights and liberties are really the focus of attention. But in collectivistic cultures, us, the group harmony is very important. From my experience, family, your relatives are really a special group that you have a lot of responsibility to. These are the major differences between the two types of cultures. Coping methods, some evidence showing that people from individualistic cultures, they tend to, when they have a challenge, when the reality is different from what they want, they change the reality, or at least they try to change the reality. But in collectivist cultures, people tend to fit in, tend to accommodate, tend to kind of work with the realities rather than changing them, more flexible in this coping. Morality in individualistic cultures, moral values are self-based, defined by the individual. You make your judgment, you make your choices, you are responsible for your actions. You are responsible for doing your right thing for yourself. But in collectivist cultures, morality, or what's right and what's wrong, is based largely on social networks. It's based on your duty. It's duty-based. Would you take care of your elderly parents? Would you take care? Would you sacrifice your career, your personal life in order to take care of aging parents and with health difficulties? In individualistic cultures, that's personal decision. You make a decision by yourself according to your personal values and preferences. But in collectivist cultures, taking care of your aging parents is a duty. You don't have a choice. Your extended family would expect that. The society would expect you to do your duty to take care of your aging parents. And in relations, individualistic culture seems to encourage temporary, casual relations. And yeah, in North America, people do tend to have some temporary, casual, less formal, less deep relations, less close. But in collectivist cultures, people would rather have some enduring, close relations that are few in number. And in collectivist cultures, people don't like to argue. They don't like confrontation. They prefer harmony, and that's different from individualistic cultures. Attributing behavior means how you explain your outcomes. If you are rich, what are the causes? If you are poor, what are the causes? In individualistic cultures, it's basically you are responsible for your outcome. It's personal responsibility. If you are unsuccessful, it's your fault. If you are super successful, it's your merit. You take credit. But in collectivist cultures, people explain their outcome and behavior mostly to social roles and norms, environmental factors. Culture does influence child raising, does influence how kids grow up. And basically, it's value. It's a socialization of value. Parents indeed raise their children according to their cultural values, that's for sure. But some of the national stereotypes really kind of exaggerate personality traits between between group differences. For example, the difference between individualistic culture versus collectivism, I feel that's exaggerated. Comparing from my background, my heritage is Chinese versus the Canadian culture. Well, it's just such a big difference. It depends on what areas you look at. If you look at the education system, the Chinese education is highly competitive. It's not aiming for harmony. It's really almost a zero-sum competition. You need to beat other kids to go to the good high school or to go to the elite colleges, universities. It's not about harmony. It's all about cutthroat competition. You want to distinguish yourself. You want to rise above the crowd to be successful. But Chinese society is usually categorized by Western psychologists as a collectivistic. That's the boundaries really are not so clear. There's a lot of gray areas. And also children can thrive under different cultures, in different cultures. This is very obvious in immigrants families. I have seen immigrant families in a new society, in a new environment, having very successful kids. And also I've seen some native born kids are very successful in the environment. So a lot of different cultural environments are good for children's development. The basics are the same. Care for the kids, take care of them, love them, and give them a lot of opportunities. Give them enriched experiences, enriched environment. That is a fundamental condition for kids to grow successfully.